I was 24 when her gavel shattered my family. Later, in rain-lit chambers, her shaking hands reread my father's file, our eyes colliding, no forgiveness asked, no hatred left, only a forbidden connection breathing between silence tonight. If you like this story, then press like button and tell in comments where from you watching this story. For more emotional and romantic love stories, then press subscribe button. Thanks. The courtroom smelled like old paper and cold air, the kind that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Winter hadn't arrived outside yet, but inside those walls, it was already freezing. I stood behind the wooden rail, fingers gripping the polished edge so tightly my knuckles turned white, as if holding on could somehow stop what was coming. My father sat at the defense table, shoulders squared, spine straight, too proud to beg, too tired to hope. He hadn't slept in days. I could see it in the faint tremor of his hands, in the way his jaw clenched every time the prosecutor spoke. My mother sat beside me, her scarf folded neatly in her lap, lips pressed together as if tears were something she could simply refuse. And then there was her. Judge Eleanor Hale. 62 years old. Silver hair pulled back with perfect discipline. A face shaped by decades of authority, untouched by doubt in public, unreadable in private. She sat above us, elevated not just by the bench but by everything she represented: law, consequence, finality. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times. Imagined her hesitating. Imagined mercy flickering in her eyes. Imagined justice bending, just once, for a man who had spent his life doing right by others. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. Guilty. One word. Clean. Sharp. Absolute. It didn't echo in the room. It detonated inside me. My mother's breath broke first, a quiet, fractured sound she tried to swallow back. My father didn't turn around. Not once. It was as if looking at us would shatter the last piece of dignity he had left, so he stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on nothing. And me? I burned her face into my memory. Every line. Every calm breath she took after ending our lives with a sentence measured in years. To me, she wasn't human anymore. She wasn't a woman with a history or regrets or loneliness. She was the law itself, cold, unreachable, untouchable. She was the villain in my story. When they led my father away, the sound of his cuffs scraping faintly against the floor followed me out of the courtroom. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I stood there long after everyone else had gone, staring at the empty bench where she had sat, as if she might come back and undo it all. She didn't. Weeks passed, but the courthouse became my second home. I filed appeals until my hands cramped. Wrote letters until my pen ran dry. Submitted motions, requests, pleas wrapped in legal language I barely understood. I learned quickly how heavy silence can be when it comes stamped with official seals. Most of my letters were ignored. Some were returned with polite rejections. None reached her. Every night, I dreamed of the courtroom. Of that single word. Of her voice. Sometimes she said it again. Sometimes she didn't speak at all, just looked at me, calm and distant, as my father disappeared behind her. One evening, after another rejected filing, I stayed late. The halls were nearly empty, the lights dimmed to a soft glow that made the marble floors reflect like water. I sat on a bench outside her chambers, my coat folded beside me, unsure why I hadn't left. Maybe I wanted to yell. Maybe I wanted her to see me, not as a case number, not as a line in a transcript, but as the son of the man she had condemned. The door opened quietly. I looked up. She stood there, no robe now, just a simple dark blazer over a blouse, her hair looser than it had been in court. For the first time, she looked smaller. Not weak. Just human. Surprise crossed her face. "You're his son," she said. Not a question. I stood. My throat tightened, hatred rising like bile, but I nodded. Yes. She hesitated, then stepped aside slightly, as if to let me pass. The invitation was unspoken, fragile. I followed her inside before she could change her mind. Her chambers were warm, lined with shelves of thick law books and framed certificates that spoke of a lifetime spent earning authority. A large window overlooked the city, dusk bleeding into night beyond the glass. A desk sat near the center, neat but not sterile, papers stacked carefully, a single framed painting leaned against the wall. It showed a winter tree, bare branches reaching into a pale sky. She noticed me looking at it. "I like things that survive the cold," she said quietly. I didn't respond. She closed the door behind us, the sound soft but final. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. "I can't change the verdict," she said at last. "I didn't ask you to," I replied, the words sharp despite my effort to stay calm. "I just wanted to understand how you sleep at night." The question hung in the air, cruel and honest. She didn't flinch. For a moment, I thought she would ask me to leave. Instead, she walked to her desk and picked up a thick file. My father's name was printed across the tab. "I don't sleep much," she said. She opened the file, her fingers brushing the pages with a familiarity that startled me. "I reread this more nights than I care to admit." I stared at her, anger faltering just enough for confusion to slip in. "You found him guilty," I said. "You ended his life." Her gaze lifted to mine, not defensive, not cold. "Just tired." "I applied the law," she said. "And the law is not the same as justice. People forget that." I wanted to argue. To accuse her of hiding behind words. But something in her voice stopped me. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't offering excuses. She was stating a truth that cost her something to carry. "I remember you," she continued. "The way you stood in the gallery. You never Saturday. You clenched your fists like you were holding yourself together." I hadn't realized she'd seen me. "I thought you hated me," she said. "I did," I answered. The honesty surprised us both. She nodded once, accepting it. "And now?" she asked. I didn't know how to answer. Outside, rain began to tap against the window, soft at first, then steady. The city lights blurred, streaking gold and white through the glass like smudged memories. She closed the file slowly, as if sealing something fragile inside. "I live with every sentence I pass," she said. "Some more than others." For the first time since that day in court, I saw the weight she carried, not as a judge, but as a woman who could never undo the consequences of her decisions. The silence returned, but it was different now. Less hostile. More dangerous. I should have left. Instead, I stayed. She walked to the window, looking out at the rain. The reflection of the city lights traced lines across her face, softening her features. "You shouldn't come here anymore," she said, not turning around. "Do you want me to stop?" I asked. She didn't answer. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the glass like a heartbeat. I picked up the painting of the winter tree from where it rested against the wall, studying the bare branches reaching upward despite the cold. "Does it survive?" I asked. She turned back to me, her eyes following my gaze. "Yes," she said. "But not without losing its leaves first." Something shifted then, quiet, irreversible. We stood there, separated by years, by law, by the man sitting alone in a cell because of her decision. Yet in that moment, there was a connection neither of us named, but both of us felt. Not love. Not forgiveness. Just recognition. When I finally left her chambers that night, the rain had soaked the courthouse steps, and the city smelled clean, like something had been washed away, but not everything. Behind me, the light in her window stayed on. And I knew, with a certainty that frightened me, that this was only the beginning. I told myself I wouldn't go back. That night, as rain washed the courthouse steps clean, I swore I was done standing in places that smelled like judgment and loss. I went home with soaked shoes and a heavier heart, replaying her words again and again. I don't sleep much. Judges weren't supposed to say things like that. They weren't supposed to remember faces. They weren't supposed to look at you like they were carrying part of your pain. For days, I stayed away. I visited my father instead. The prison smelled of bleach and metal, a sterile attempt to erase humanity. He sat across from me in his worn uniform, hands folded, eyes careful. He didn't ask about the appeals anymore. He already knew how that story ended. "You look tired," he said. "I'm fine," I lied. He studied me the way fathers do when they sense something wrong but choose silence instead of pressure. When our time was up, he placed his hand against the glass. "Don't let this place live inside you," he said softly. I nodded, even as I felt it already had. That evening, an envelope waited outside my apartment door. No return address. Just my name, written carefully, as if whoever wrote it understood the weight letters could carry. Inside was a single page. "If you still want answers, my chambers are open tomorrow after 6. I stared at the paper for a long time. I told myself it was about my father. About justice. About closure. But when 6 o'clock came, I was already on my way. The courthouse after hours felt like a different world. The noise was gone, replaced by the soft hum of lights and distant echoes of footsteps that weren't there. I walked slowly, each step measured, as if moving too fast might break something fragile. Her door was open. She sat at her desk, glasses perched low on her nose, reading, no robe, no armor. Just a woman surrounded by books and quiet. "You came," she said, looking up. "I said I wanted answers," I replied. She gestured to the chair across from her. This time, I sat at A. Between us lay a thin stack of papers, not legal documents. Letters. "My unsent letters," she said when she noticed my eyes on them. "I write them when I can't sleep." "To who?" I asked. She paused. "To people I've judged," she said. "Most will never read them." The room felt smaller then, as if the walls were listening. She slid one letter aside and opened my father's file again, not defensively, but reverently. Like touching something sacred and dangerous at the same time. "There are parts of a case the record doesn't capture," she said. The pauses. The glances. The moments when truth almost speaks but stops short. I leaned forward despite myself. "And what did you see?" I asked. She hesitated. That hesitation mattered. "I saw a good man who made one terrible mistake," she said. "And a system that doesn't know how to measure goodness once a line is crossed." Anger rose in me, sharp and familiar. "Then why?" I demanded. "Why say guilty if you knew that?" Her eyes met mine, steady, unflinching. "Because the law is not allowed to feel," she said. "But I am." The words hit harder than I expected. Outside, the sky darkened, clouds pressing low against the windows. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, not a storm yet, but a warning. She stood and walked to a small cabinet, pulling out an old photograph. She handed it to me. It showed a younger version of her, standing beside a man I assumed was her husband. Both were smiling. Happy. Unburdened. He died 20 years ago, she said quietly. Wrong place. Wrong time. I didn't know what to say. After that, she continued, the law became easier than life. It asks less of you. I returned the photograph to her, my fingers brushing hers for the briefest second. The contact startled us both. She pulled her hand back first. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said. I shouldn't be hearing it, I replied. Yet neither of us moved away. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking time we weren't supposed to be sharing. You can hate me, she said. Most do. I don't know what I feel, I admitted. That was the truth, and it scared me more than hatred ever had. The rain returned suddenly, heavy against the glass, drenching the city below. Water streaked down the windows like tears the building itself refused to shed. She walked to the window again, arms crossed loosely, her reflection overlapping with the storm outside. You remind me of someone, she said. Who? Myself, she answered. Before I learned how to bury anger under responsibility. I stood, closing the distance between us, not touching, just near enough to feel the warmth she tried to hide. Then tell me something, I said. Do you regret it? She closed her eyes. Yes. The word was barely audible. Something inside me shifted then, not forgiveness, not love, but understanding. Dangerous, fragile understanding. She turned to face me, rainlight softening the sharp lines of her face. You shouldn't come anymore, she said again, firmer this time. And if I do? I asked. Her breath caught. Then neither of us will walk away unchanged. The clock struck 7. I stepped back. Good night, Judge Hale, I said. She flinched at the title. Good night, she replied, after a pause. And, thank you for listening. As I left, I glanced back once. She was standing alone by the window, the letters untouched on her desk, the storm outside mirroring something breaking quietly inside her. I walked into the rain, unsure whether I was moving toward answers, or toward something far more dangerous. Behind me, the courthouse lights dimmed. But her window stayed bright. And I knew, with unsettling clarity, that whatever had begun between us was no longer about my father's case. It was about two people standing too close to a line neither of them was meant to cross. After that night, the city felt different. Not louder. Not brighter. Just closer. As if every street I walked, every window I passed, was leaning in, curious about something it wasn't meant to witness. I didn't go back to the courthouse the next day. Or the next. I told myself distance was the responsible thing. That whatever had begun behind those closed chambers needed air before it turned poisonous. I focused on work. On visiting my father. On pretending my thoughts didn't drift toward a woman with silver hair and tired eyes every time rain touched glass. But distance doesn't erase a line once you've seen it. It only makes you aware of how close you already are. I saw her again by accident. Or maybe accidents are just moments we refuse to admit we wanted. I was crossing the street near the courthouse when a black car stopped at the curb. The door opened, and she stepped out, briefcase in hand, hair neatly pinned back, her judge's armor fully restored. She looked exactly as she had on the bench, composed, untouchable, carved from authority. She didn't see me at first. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stopped. She turned, sensing something, and our eyes met across the sidewalk. For a second, the world stalled. No chambers. No letters. No rain-streaked windows. Just us, exposed to daylight. Her expression shifted, not shock, not warmth, something quieter. Recognition wrapped in restraint. She nodded once, a professional gesture meant to draw a line where one no longer existed. I nodded back. She entered the courthouse without looking again. I stood there longer than necessary, watching the doors close behind her, feeling something tighten in my chest. That night, I dreamed of a courtroom with no judge, no jury, just a single chair beneath a spotlight. When I woke, my hands were shaking. 3 days later, a message arrived on my phone. I hope you're well. E. No invitation. No questions. Just a sentence that felt like a door left unlocked. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back. I hope you are too. The reply came almost immediately. Some lines are easier to see than to stay away from. I didn't answer, because anything I said would have been a step closer. We didn't meet that week, or the next. But her presence threaded itself through my days in quieter ways. I noticed law books in shop windows, watched judges on the news and wondered what they carried home with them. I found myself thinking about that winter tree painting, bare branches surviving cold they never chose. When I visited my father again, he studied me with that same careful silence. You're somewhere else lately, he said. Just tired, I replied. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on mine. You don't owe this place your whole life, he added gently. I didn't know whether he meant the prison or the past. The next time I saw her, it was evening. The courthouse was nearly empty again, the halls dimmed to that familiar after-hours glow. I had no appointment. No reason to be there except the truth I was done lying to myself about. Her door was closed. I stood outside longer than I should have, my reflection faint in the polished wood. I raised my hand, hesitated. Then the door opened. She stood there, surprised, then resigned. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I know, I answered. She stepped aside anyway. Inside, the air felt heavier than before, charged with all the conversations we hadn't had. She didn't offer me a seat this time. Neither did I ask. I thought you understood why distance mattered, she said. I do, I replied. That doesn't make it easier. She exhaled slowly, removing her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose as if the day had weighed her down. This can't become a habit, she said. I'm not asking for one. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her expression faltered. Why are you here? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't neat. Because every time I try to hate you, I said finally, I fail. The words hung between us, dangerous and undeniable. She turned away, walking toward the window, her back to me. Outside, the city was washed in golden gray, the sun sinking low, stretching shadows across the streets. You think that's kind? She asked softly. To say something like that? No, I said. I think it's honest. Silence followed. Then she spoke again, quieter now. You don't know what it costs me to hear that. I took a step closer, not touching, just closing the space. The distance between us felt deliberate now, measured in breath rather than feet. Tell me, I said. She shook her head. You're too young to carry this, she replied. I'm old enough to choose, I said. That made her turn. Her eyes searched my face, not for desire, but for certainty. For recklessness. For something she could dismiss. She found none of it. This ends badly, she said. Most honest things do, I answered. Thunder rolled outside, distant but present, echoing through the glass. She crossed the room and picked up one of the letters from her desk, unopened, the paper slightly worn at the edges. I write these so I don't speak, she said. Words are safer on paper. She handed it to me. It wasn't addressed. It wasn't sealed. I didn't open it. "Why give this to me?" I asked. "Because I'm afraid of what I'll say if I don't," she replied. My fingers tightened around the letter. "This is the line," she said, her voice barely steady. "Once crossed, there's no pretending this is about answers anymore." I looked at the paper. Then at her. "Then don't pretend," I said. She closed her eyes. For a moment, I thought she might tell me to leave. Instead, she whispered, "You can't stay long." "I know." She moved past me, opening the door, holding it open without looking. The dismissal hurt more than I expected. But as I stepped into the hall, she spoke again. "Tomorrow," she said quietly. "After sunset." "Not here." I turned back. "Where?" She met my eyes, fear and resolve intertwined. "Somewhere without titles," she said. "Where we're just people." The door closed gently behind me. I stood alone in the corridor, letter still unopened in my hand, heart pounding with the knowledge that whatever waited tomorrow wasn't justice, or closure, or revenge. It was choice. And once made, it would change everything. Outside, the sky darkened. The line had been drawn. And for the first time, I knew I was ready to step over it. She chose a place without history. No courthouse. No chambers. No walls that had heard too much already. It was a small cafe near the river, the kind people passed without noticing. Warm lights. Wooden tables. A window that reflected the city instead of judging it. When I arrived, she was already there, seated near the glass, her coat folded neatly beside her chair. No robe. No briefcase. No armor. For the first time, she looked like someone the world could wound. "You came," she said softly. "You asked me to," I replied. She nodded, fingers wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. Steam rose slowly, fogging the space between us. For a moment, we said nothing. Outside, the river moved steadily, indifferent to our hesitation. "This is a mistake," she said. "I know." "Then why are you here?" I looked at her hands. Slight tremor. Controlled. Familiar now. "Because pretending this isn't happening is worse," I answered. Her gaze lifted, sharp, searching. "This doesn't get easier," she said. "It gets heavier." "I'm already carrying the weight," I replied. "At least let it mean something." That did it. Something broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way glass fractures under pressure you don't see until it's too late. She looked away, out the window, at the river reflecting city lights. "I never meant to know you," she said. "You were supposed to be a face in a gallery. A memory that faded." "And instead?" I asked. "Instead," she said quietly, "you stayed." I didn't reach for her. I didn't need to. The distance between us was already charged, alive with everything we weren't touching. "You think this is about love," she continued. "But it's about consequence." "Everything is," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're asking me to risk." "I do," I said. "And I'm not asking you to choose me." That made her turn. "Then what are you asking?" "For honesty," I said. "Just once. Without titles." She studied me for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. The same handwriting. The same careful pressure. "I wrote this last night," she said. "I told myself I wouldn't give it to you." She slid it across the table. This time, I opened it. "There are cases I forget. And then there is your father's. It follows me. Not because I doubt the law, but because I doubt myself. I wonder who I would be if I had chosen mercy that day. My chest tightened. She watched my face closely, bracing for something: anger, accusation, blame. Instead, I folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the table. "You should have told him," I said. Her breath caught. "I can't," she whispered. "Judges don't confess to the convicted." "No," I said. "But people can." She shook her head. "You don't know what that would do." "I do," I said. "It would hurt." Silence pressed down between us again, thicker this time. Then her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. Color drained from her face. "It's the prison," she said. I didn't speak. She answered. "Yes. I understand. I'll inform the family." She ended the call slowly, as if each second mattered. "What happened?" I asked. She swallowed. "Your father requested a transfer," she said. "Facility reassignment." My heart dropped. "Why?" I asked. She hesitated. "He cited emotional distress," she said carefully. "He believes someone close to him has betrayed him." The words landed like a blow. I stood abruptly. "He knows," I said. She didn't deny it. "He asked for your name," she said. I refused. My hands shook. "He shouldn't even know you exist," I said. "And yet," she replied, "this is the cost of proximity." The cafe suddenly felt too small. I walked to the window, pressing my palm against the glass, watching the river pull everything forward without pause. When did this stop being about justice? I asked quietly. She stood behind me, not touching, but close enough that I felt her presence like heat. "It stopped the moment we met outside the courtroom," she said. I turned. "You should step away," she said. "Before this takes something from you that can't be returned." "I already lost my father," I said. "This won't take him again." Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with something worse. Understanding. "I can't be the reason he loses faith in you," she said. "I didn't ask you to be," I replied. "But you already are part of this." Her shoulders sagged slightly, years of control slipping. "I became a judge to keep the world at a distance," she said. "And now it's too close." The rain began again, soft at first, tapping against the glass like hesitant fingers. She reached out then, just once, her hand brushing my sleeve, light as a question. The contact sent a quiet shock through both of us. She pulled back immediately. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For wanting this," she answered. I shook my head. "Wanting isn't the crime," I said. "Choosing wrong is." Her gaze locked onto mine. "And what if there is no right choice?" she asked. The question echoed between us, unanswered. Later, when we parted outside, the rain had soaked the streets, turning reflections into distorted mirrors. She stood beneath a streetlight, her coat drawn tight, her face half lit, half shadowed. "This has to end," she said. "Does it?" I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction too long. "Not tonight," she said. She walked away before I could respond. That night, I went to see my father. He sat across from me, eyes tired, mouth set in a line I knew too well. "You're seeing her," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. Silence stretched between us, heavy and fragile. "She took my freedom," he said finally. "Don't let her take your future too." I swallowed. "What if she's not who you think she is?" I asked. He laughed once, short, humorless. "Judges are exactly who they choose to be," he said. When I left the prison, the sky was clear, the rain gone as if it had never fallen. But inside me, something had cracked open. That night, my phone lit up with a single message. I told you this would hurt. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back. Pain doesn't scare me. Losing everything without trying does. The reply came minutes later. Then tomorrow, everything changes. I lay awake until dawn, listening to the city breathe, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, confession, separation, or ruin, there would be no returning to who we were before. Because the truth had finally spoken. And it didn't ask for permission before breaking us both. Morning arrived without mercy. No rain. No clouds. Just a clear sky that felt almost cruel in its calmness, as if the world had decided nothing extraordinary was happening, while everything inside me was unraveling. Her message stayed on my screen long after dawn. Then tomorrow, everything changes. I read it again and again, trying to imagine what everything meant. Resignation. Confession. Goodbye. Or something worse. I went to the courthouse early, not because I was invited, but because waiting anywhere else felt unbearable. The building looked the same, stone, glass, authority frozen in architecture, but I knew now how thin that image really was. People passed me in the halls without recognition. Clerks. Lawyers. Bailiffs. Each one carrying their own quiet compromises. Her door was closed. I sat on the bench outside her chambers, the same place where anger had once fueled me. Now there was no rage left, only a dull ache and a terrible clarity. At exactly 9, the door opened. She didn't look surprised to see me. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "But neither should you." She studied me for a moment, then stepped aside. Inside, the room looked different. Bare. The winter tree painting was gone. Several shelves stood half empty. Files were stacked neatly in boxes, labeled and sealed. Her desk was cleared of personal items, no letters, no photographs, no hesitation left behind. My chest tightened. "You're leaving," I said. "Yes." The word landed with quiet finality. She didn't sit. Neither did I. "I submitted my resignation last night," she continued. "It will be announced this afternoon." I exhaled sharply. "For us?" I asked. She shook her head immediately. "No," she said. "For me." I searched her face, trying to understand. "I crossed a line long before you walked into my life," she said. "You just made me see it." I took a step toward her. "You don't have to give up everything," I said. She met my gaze, steady, resolved. "Some positions don't allow partial honesty," she replied. "Once you see yourself clearly, you either step away, or you become someone you don't recognize." Silence filled the space. I wanted to tell her she was still good. That she hadn't ruined me. That love, whatever this was, didn't have to end like a punishment. But love doesn't argue with truth. "What happens now?" I asked. She turned toward the window, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. "Now," she said, "I disappear from your life." The words cut deeper than I expected. "That's not fair," I said. She smiled sadly. "Fairness isn't something I'm qualified to measure anymore." I laughed once, soft, broken. "You're really doing this," I said. "Yes." "For him?" I asked. She turned back. "For your father," she said. "For you. And for the woman I almost became." That was when I realized this wasn't sacrifice. This was atonement. Later that day, the announcement spread quickly. Judge Eleanor Hale announces retirement effective immediately. No scandal. No explanation. Just silence dressed as dignity. I watched from the back of the courtroom as colleagues shook her hand, praised her legacy, spoke of honor and service. No one mentioned the cost of carrying other people's lives for decades. When her gaze found mine across the room, there was no regret in it. Only farewell. That evening, I visited my father. He looked up when I entered, something unreadable in his expression. "She resigned," he said. I nodded. "She didn't have to," he continued. "I know," I replied. He studied me carefully. "Did she do it for you?" he asked. I hesitated. "For herself," I said finally. He leaned back, considering. After a long moment, he sighed. "Then maybe," he said slowly, "she wasn't as heartless as I believed. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something close." When I left the prison, the sun was setting, painting the sky in quiet gold. I stood outside for a long time, unsure where to go. My phone vibrated. "I'm leaving the city tonight." I didn't reply immediately. When I finally did, I wrote only one sentence. "Tell me where." Her response came after a pause. "The train station." 1 hour. The platform was crowded with strangers carrying ordinary goodbyes. Luggage rolled. Announcements echoed. Livs moved forward without ceremony. She stood near the edge, coat buttoned, a single bag at her feet. No robe. No title. Just Eleanor. We didn't embrace. We stood facing each other, close enough to feel the gravity of what we were losing. "I won't ask you to come with me," she said. "I wouldn't go," I replied. "Not yet." She nodded, accepting that without pain. "You deserve a life that isn't shaped by my decisions," she said. "And you deserve one that isn't defined by mine," I answered. The train whistle sounded, low, final. She reached into her bag and handed me something. The winter tree painting. "I want you to have this," she said. "It survived." I swallowed. "So did we," I said quietly. Her eyes softened. "Not everything that survives stays," she replied. The train doors opened. She picked up her bag. "Goodbye," she said. "Not forever. Not I love you. Just goodbye." I watched her step onto the train, take a seat by the window. She didn't look back as it pulled away. I stood there long after the platform emptied, holding the painting against my chest, knowing this was what letting go actually felt like, not dramatic, not loud. Just permanent. That night, I hung the painting in my apartment. Bare branches against pale sky. Strong. Alone. Still standing. My phone buzzed one last time. A part of me will always stay in that courtroom. I typed back. A part of me learned how to leave. I didn't know then if that was true. But I wanted it to be. And somewhere between loss and release, I understood something painful and necessary. Some love stories don't end because they fail. They end because they demand too much truth to survive intact. Years passed, but the city never forgot her. I did. Not her presence, not her voice, those lingered like a familiar ache, but the woman herself, the Eleanor Hale who had taught me the fragility of law and love, became a memory tucked carefully in the corners of my mind. Life moved forward. My father was released early after a procedural review, his hair grayer, his hands steadier, but the sadness of what had been taken from him remained etched into every line of his face. He didn't speak often of the judge who had condemned him, but I saw the restraint in his gaze whenever I mentioned her. She was human, I told him once, sitting together on the worn couch of our modest home. And sometimes, humans make impossible choices. He nodded, silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that carries forgiveness without words. I often wondered where she was. Did she ever think of me? Did she ever regret leaving? Or had the world she had built, one without me in it, become enough? Then, one afternoon, years later, I returned to the cafe by the river, the one she had chosen for honesty, for our first fragile conversation outside the courthouse walls. The same table still sat near the glass, though the lights had dimmed slightly, and the river's reflection had changed with the seasons. I sat, waiting, though I wasn't sure I knew who I was waiting for. And then she appeared. Not as a judge. Not as someone I had once feared. She was just Eleanor, carrying herself with quiet dignity, coat wrapped snugly against the cold, her hair catching the sunlight in streaks of silver and gold. She smiled when she saw me, not a full smile, but enough to make the years between us feel shorter, like pages skipped and finally returned to. We didn't speak immediately. We only observed each other across the table. The space between us had softened, but it wasn't gone. There was still distance, respect, and memory folded into every movement, every glance. "You came," she said finally. Her voice was the same as I remembered, soft, deliberate, carefully measured. "I wondered if you ever thought about us," I said, choosing my words like fragile glass. Her smile faltered slightly. "I think about it every time I pass a courthouse." We laughed quietly, the sound carrying more relief than joy. "I wanted to tell you," she continued, "that leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. Not because of law or reputation, but because I had to leave you." "I know," I said. "And I've carried that too. All these years." For a moment, the river reflected our silence, stretching our shadows across the floor like two people standing on the edge of what could have been. "I'm not the same person you met," she said softly, eyes tracing the table's edge. "Neither are you." "No," I admitted. "But some part of us survived anyway." She reached into her bag and pulled out the winter tree painting, the same one she had handed me years ago. She placed it on the table between us. "Some things can endure," she said. "Even if we can't." I touched the edge of the painting. The bare branches still reached toward the sky, unbroken, resilient. "I think we taught each other something," I said quietly. "About truth, and forgiveness, and letting go." "Yes," she said, her eyes glimmering with quiet warmth. "And love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go before it destroys everything." The cafe was almost empty, but the space between us felt infinite. I didn't reach for her hand. She didn't reach for mine. The years of distance, decisions, and choices that had built walls around us were still there, invisible but undeniable. We stayed like that for a long time. Not talking. Not touching. Just being. Two people who had changed each other, who had survived love by leaving it intact rather than breaking it with possession or desire. Finally, she spoke again. "Will you ever forgive me fully?" "I already have," I said. "For everything. For the law. For yourself. For leaving." Her lips quirked, the closest she would come to smiling fully in this moment. "I have to go soon," she said. "There are lives that need me. Responsibilities that never end." "I understand," I said. And with that, she rose. Not hurriedly. Not dramatically. Just with quiet certainty, the kind that had always defined her. She placed the painting carefully on the table. "Keep it," she said. "So you remember, some love stories aren't meant to be celebrated. They're meant to survive." I nodded. Outside, the river reflected the fading sun, colors melting into the horizon. She walked toward the door, and I watched her leave without looking back. But this time, the ache in my chest was different. It wasn't loss. It was recognition. Respect. Gratitude. I stayed at the table long after she was gone, tracing the lines of the winter tree with my fingers, feeling something that had been absent for years: peace. Because we had loved each other in the only way we could, fully, quietly, and responsibly. And that love had changed me. And maybe, somewhere in a way I would never fully understand, it had changed her too. As night fell, I left the cafe. The city lights reflected on wet streets from a recent rain, glittering like scattered memories. I walked slowly, carrying the painting, carrying the weight of what we had shared, carrying the certainty that life moves forward, but leaves traces of those it cannot forget. Somewhere, across the city, Eleanor Hale was continuing her life. She was no longer my judge, no longer a figure of authority and fear. She was simply a woman who had carried the consequences of her choices and had loved quietly, beautifully, with restraint. And I had learned how to survive love that wasn't mine to keep. I placed the painting carefully in my apartment. Bare branches against pale sky. Resilient. Untouched. Silent witnesses to what had been, what had ended, and what had survived. That night, I didn't dream of courtrooms, or verdicts, or rain. I dreamed of a winter tree standing alone in the sunlight, unbroken, beautiful in its solitude. And I woke knowing that love, real love, sometimes leaves you with nothing but memory, and yet, that is enough to change everything. Because some love stories aren't meant to be celebrated. They're meant to survive. And ours did.